Hello, hello, hello everyone. This is Nevernan, and today we will be doing a fortunate update on the challenge, and also a minor channel update as well. So first, let's get the channel update out of the way. MPL, the Monotype Premier League, will be starting soon. It will be starting in 3 weeks approximately. So next week I will be doing a metagame review talking about what the metagame may or may not look like. And I will also be doing a draft review as well, because now that I'm more associated with the community, I'm able to give better ideas on how I feel about drafts and how I feel about the chances of a certain team winning or not. So, with that being said, let's move on to the content of this video. So, I reached a 1550s, which is where I struggled to get before during my last attempt at trying to complete this challenge. Now, I did drop from the 5050s as of today, but I do have a recording, or not a recording, but a screenshot proof of me doing it, and I also have the replay of me hitting 1550s. Unfortunately, I am under contract to not reveal the team that I used to get to 1550, but this is another team that I did use to help me get slightly higher back into the 1500s at least. So we will look at this, and yes, it is Psychic again, because obviously Psychic is probably one of my best performing types. And interestingly enough, apparently Psychic, when wielded well, is actually one of the better types when it comes to overall matchups in Monotype, which is very interesting. It's actually a B tier type when it comes to matchups, which you wouldn't think is true considering how poorly it's received by most of the community, but if you look at how higher elo players play the type, it actually is it generally does do pretty well once it's used correctly, but the issue is, once again, Psychic is very easily counterable, and it's the same issue that Fighting had for several years, was that if you don't have the specific team archetype that beats the one thing that just completely demolishes your team, you'll have ladder sessions where you'll just lose a bunch of elo, or you'll have ladder sessions where you'll just do pretty well. It's a very volatile type. It's very much like Fighting, but unlike Fighting, it has a lot more options. But also, unlike Fighting, it's not as consistent as you would like it to be, due to the nature of those options. Like Side Spam, for example, is very good against offensive types or types that don't really have a good way to deal with Psychic Spam, since, Psychic isn't a very common type. But Side Spam is really bad against Dark and Dragon, for example, because Dragon has Roaring Boon to swap into Psychic type attacks. You also have access to Hisuian Gudra and Arcalodon that just kind of stifle your Psychic Spam a lot. And Hisuian Gudra in particular is very dangerous for a lot of your mons to deal with. So yeah, it's a very annoying type to deal with Side Spam. It's still winnable matchup, but it's a lot harder than it would need to be. And it's just an example of like a type that once people know how to, or once you find a team that you're good with, that you can use the type with, you feel almost unstoppable until you run into one of those brutal matchups that you have to swap teams for. But yeah, with that being said, I will talk about this team that helped me get into the 1500s again. And again, it's a Bronzong team, which I know a lot of people aren't really huge fans of Bronzong, but yeah. Recently, I was made aware that Hypnosis was a move that this thing did get, and normally I wouldn't use something like Hypnosis due to the fact that Hypnosis, excuse me, is just very inconsistent. But then I realized that I was using Body Slam before, which is basically also inconsistent, because Body Slam is basically a completely useless move unless I get the Paralyzed chance, which is a 30% chance. Now, a 30% chance versus a 60% chance is night and day. So I might as well just be using Hypnosis instead, since if I hit Hypnosis, it's a free sleep and I get to position my Pokemon accordingly. But again, it's not as useful as you would think it is because of Bronzong's limited options and its inability to really pivot very well. So yeah, very unfortunate in that regard. But it is, I will say that it is definitely better than just having Body Slam, because now if you have Hypnosis, you can just put something like Muck to sleep, for example, which could be very useful for your team, or you can put something like, or not Base Muck, you know, Alolan Muck, but yeah, you can put something like Barraskewda to sleep on the switch. Like, it's just a lot more useful than just praying for a Body Slam Paralysis. Paralysis is still a better status ailment overall, I would say, for this team, but Hypnosis is probably the better move for Bronzong to have. But yeah, with that said, there's not really much different from the set. Still Body Press, Heavy Slam, and Stealth Rock. Stealth Rock just immensely useful, and it's very, very, very handy to have. But yeah, not much else to really talk about with Bronzong here, so let's move on to Indeedee. Indeedee is the same set too. Didn't really change much with this one. Still Terrain Setter with Expanding Force, Dazzling Gleam. I was thinking about maybe doing a defensive variant instead, so that it was actually able to like take hits from stuff like Gholdengo. Well, I found that Indeedee is still, even with defensive investment, really frail and not very useful, so I think I'm just better off with using this slightly offensive set and outrunning the few things that it does outspeed, like Hisui and Samurott, for example, and using Dazzling Gleam on that thing and doing as much damage as possible. As well as encoring stuff like Sucker Punch on a few Pokemon. But yeah, very niche set, but it does what it needs to do. Next up, we have a more interesting mon in Delphox. So, Delphox actually recently rose in the viability rankings. Recently being like 2 months ago, but it did rise in the viability rankings in the last update. And this mon is actually slightly decent. And you would think it's not that great because Armor Rouge is just usually a ton better. It hits harder, it has weak armor, which is a significantly better ability. But the one thing Delphox has over Armor Rouge is its speed. 337 is actually not that bad. It outspeeds base 100s, which is very handy. And also outspeeds, most notably, Garchomp, which is very helpful for the ground and dragon matchups. But the main issue with Delphox's speed is that it's still slower than the base 110s, which are 350s. And being slower than that is unideal. However, because of another set that I'll show you, it's actually somewhat fine to have this issue on Delphox. And Delphox is still pretty decently fast. Like, 337 is still no joke of a speed tier, even in modern generation. It's still a decently fast Pokemon, so you're still able to outspeed a decent portion of the metagame, and you're able to make use of Eject Pack, which is procced by your Overheat. And by using Overheat, you have a really strong move, and you can also pivot, which is something that this team typically doesn't have a very easy time doing. Because not a lot of Pokemon on Psychic are actually very good at pivoting and being offensive threats at the same time. The only one that's slightly decent at this is Jirachi, that I can think of. But Jirachi would rather just use a Choice Scarf set at that point, and the Choice Scarf set isn't really that great. So, with that in mind, we use Delphox instead with Eject Pack, and I decided to put Magician as the ability. Since, unfortunately, if you do think that, oh, once you use Overheat, it'll proc your Eject Pack and then you'll steal the item from the person, that's not how that interaction works. First, Overheat is used and you lose Eject Pack, and then you switch out, and then on the next time Delphox hits someone, it procs Magician. Unfortunately, that is how it works, but even then, stealing an item from a Pokemon is still very good. Like stealing Hisui and Gudra's leftovers, very handy. Stealing an Assault Vest from Muck, also very handy. Stealing Heavy Duty Boots from any Pokemon is very handy as well. Like, for example, Articuno. That's a very big mon to get a Magician proc on. And Heavy Duty Boots is very beneficial for Delphox, as it is a fire type and would like to be immune to not only spikes, but also those stealth rocks that do 25% of its HP. So, yes, Delphox is actually able to have a slight niche as a pivoting special attacker, special breaker as well. Now, typically you would run Encore on this mon to create more opportunities for yourself, but because we already have Encore on DD, I felt like that was unnecessary, so I ended up just deciding to double down on its power with Expanding Force, since this is a Psy-Spam team, and it is taking the place of Armor Rouge on my previous team, so I decided that Expanding Force would be ideal to have. It also has Nasty Plot to not only outplay Sucker Punch, but to also become a bigger threat, since this team does actually have a slight wall-breaking problem without Armor Rouge Weakness Policy Boost. So Nasty Plot helps alleviate that a little bit. Now this mon is obviously not perfect, it's still very frail, and it doesn't hit as hard as it needs to, but it still gets the job done, and Overheat just makes up for a lot of the lacking power that you would have. Expanding Force in terrain and Overheat makes up for a lot of the power, and again, if you've used Hall Lucia before, you will know that high-powered stabs can absolutely make up for a somewhat lacking attack stat. So, yeah. Delphox is pretty decent. Still not the greatest Pokemon ever, but and I definitely wouldn't say it's higher than the D tier it is right now, but I definitely do think it has a usable niche. And on this team, it definitely does fulfill that niche very well. So let's move on to the next Pokemon, which will be Hatterene. Hatterene is a mon that I really do not like using, but fortunately on this team it does serve a very good purpose as a Trick Room setter. Now, this is supposed to be a offensive Trick Room set, otherwise known as OTR, but this Hatterene set is actually not too opposed to just using Trick Room and dying as well, since Hoopa and Delphox can both make use of its Trick Room. Because remember what I said about Delphox being slower than the base 350s, or not 350s, but 110s, you know what I meant. Now that Hatterene has Trick Room, Delphox can outspeed those pesky fast Pokemon. So essentially, if we are in a situation where, for example, we have Barraskewda or Excadrill in their respective weathers. Now, Excadrill does generally just get countered by Bronzong, unless there's a Gravity Landorus on the team. But even so, if this does happen, or ends up happening, you will just end up clicking a Trick Room on Hatterene on the turn that Excadrill is swapped in. Pray that you live a hit from Earthquake, which if it's non-banned, you will live an Earthquake, but if it isn't banded, or if it is banded, you will probably die. But if it isn't banded, then you'll probably survive. But you have to be careful of Ironhead, but thankfully Bronzong can take care of that. But yeah, if you get a proper read, you can get a Trick Room off, and Delphox will basically make it so that Excadrill cannot sweep your team. Same thing with Barraskewda, respectively. So it's still not the greatest answer. I still think Gardevoir is a better answer to the offensive rain sweepers, or the offensive weather sweepers, but Hatterene does do a decent job of stopping them as well. And Hatterene also has the added caveat of being a Calm Mind setup sweeper, which allows it to take advantage of those mons. Now, funnily enough, there was another team that I was using, Sinistra, which I mentioned in my previous video, that uses a very similar set, except Sinistra has access to Strength Step, which allows it to heal more consistently than Hatterene's Draining Kiss, but Hatterene's Draining Kiss is still a ridiculously powerful move, and it's because of its 75% healing from the damage that Draining Kiss does, and because of that, I do think that this set can still work very well as like a soft check to certain physical attackers, or fast physical attackers. It's still not perfect check, but it's definitely a lot better than you would think it is. Especially after one Calm Mind. So, yeah. That's it for Hatterene, and also we changed the item. Instead of it being leftovers, we chose Heavy Duty Boots, because yes, even though Hatterene can potentially stop Hazard from spawning, there is this Pokemon called Hisuian Samurott that just kind of ignores that and puts hazards up anyway. Same with Kleavor on both Rock and Bug, so having heavy duty boots is just still handy, just to make sure you're able to check what you need to check when the time comes. Speaking of checking, we have Assault Vest Hoopa Unbound, which is doing the exact same thing that it did on the previous team, with the same EV spread as well. It's just there to take special hits and deal as much damage as possible. We still are going to keep Psychic on it over Expanding Force due to Expanding Force just not being consistent enough, and when I want to put Hoopa Unbound on the field, I typically do not have Expanding Force boosted by Psychic terrain, so it's just better for it to have the stronger Psychic. I am thinking about putting potentially Psyshock on this thing to deal with a few other Pokemon like Gallade, for example, but as it is right now, Gallade and Chansey actually, but not Chansey, Blissey, but yeah. Definitely thinking about editing the Hoopa set on this team a little bit, just to see what I can ideally do. And then lastly, we have Gallade, who is doing the exact same thing, but now it is the sole Choice Scarfer on the team. Which honestly is probably fine, since it makes it a lot easier to play speed control and not have to make as many 50-50s for which win condition I want to set up. And Knockoff is being used over Night Slash because Knockoff is just infinitely useful. Even with Delphox Magician being like a pseudo knockoff, I still think it's better to have access to the move itself in specific matchups. But yeah, that will be it for the team review. And now we can move on to some of the replays that we achieved with this team. Now again, this team is not the one I reached 1550 with. I reached it with a different team, but I am under contract to not reveal that team or any of its aspects, and I'm not even sure if I can even show replays of it. So with that in mind, I apologize for not being able to show that, but I did officially reach 1550 before, and I'll probably post the screenshot of it on the thumbnail of this video. If not, there will probably be a link in the description showing it, but yes, that did happen. Alright, so here we have a replay against Water, which is a relatively neutral matchup, but yeah, here we go again with the Hisuian and Samurott as I was talking about. And we have a Alomomola and Rotom Wash team, Pokemon on the team as well. So let's take a look and see how this will do. Delphox may not be useful here, but we can see what it can potentially do. So here comes Delphox. We do an immediate overheat to try and pivot out, but unfortunately it does miss against the Alomomola, so we just hard swap into Bronzong immediately. Fortunately, Alomomola does flip turn, and it gets the Ceaseless Edge off, which allows me to put up Stealth Rock on Bronzong, but Bronzong will fall. Hedoran does come in, and because of the thing, it does not take a lot of damage, and we see Calm Mind come through. Liquidation is used by Alomomola to try and lower the defense of my Hedoran, but you will see that they will not get that to happen. Alomomola is taking very good hits from Hedoran now, as we do see it continuing to keep using Liquidation. I put Trick Room back up again, thinking that it might use Flip Turn, but it just chose not to use Flip Turn. I wanted to use an additional Calm Mind, but I instant predicted that it would go into Toxapex, so I got the Toxapex Psychic Predict immediately. As I continue to keep Draining Kissing to keep my health up, since remember I do not have leftovers, so I need to get as much HP as possible. Trick Room is now over, and I'm in a very vulnerable spot. Razor Shell does not crit, thankfully, but it does lower my defense. Unfortunately, I got greedy and decided to try and use Trick Room there instead of clicking Draining Kiss, and it would cost me my Hedoran and would make this game infinitely harder than it needed to be. But yes, when a knockoff does come through, and we do remove Rotom's leftovers, Pain Split comes through, Rotom does heal a bunch, but thankfully Hoopa is slower than the Rotom, so we're able to get that Psychic off. Samurott does come in, but I opt to put in Indeedee and sack it. The final... Now, Indeedee comes in here so that Samurott does not have the option to use Sucker Punch against any of my remaining Pokemon, which is actually incredibly helpful. We go into Delphox to prevent the Keldeo from KOing my Gallade. Although Gallade probably could have survived that initial hit. But yes, we end up using Leaf Blade, which is enough to KO everything else. And this is a rare example of Leaf Blade actually completely carrying a match, as the move is generally not clicked on that much, except for this purpose, because if Toxapex wasn't eliminated by my good read before, Leaf Blade would have never been in a position to be useful here. And because I have Psychic Terrain up, Hisuian Samurott cannot use Sucker Punch on me, so without a faster Mon than my Choice Scarf Gallade, his entire team just falls apart without Toxapex, and I win as a result. I would say well done by me, but there's definitely things I could have done better in this game. But yeah, that is generally how I approach a matchup like that. And as you saw, Hatterene was just able to do a lot more because it didn't take that early 16% from spikes. So yeah. Alright, next replay we have is over here, which you can see is against grass. So we get the Instant Spore on Bronzong. Some Foul Play does come through from the Amoonguss. Bronzong is healing a little bit from its leftovers, but it's not getting that much. As I try to get the turn 1 Wake Up, but I unfortunately do not get it. Ogerpon comes in, and Hatterene does not get Oka by the Ogerpon, as we end up doing a bunch of damage to it, but not end up defeating it. Delphox comes in, and once again, there we go. Because Ogerpon is faster, Delphox is actually able to use its low speed to beat it. But yes, in comes the Sinistcha. And here comes a rare terrain war in Gen 9, with Rillaboom and Indeedee facing off against each other and making it hard for each other to keep terrains up. I need terrain more than this guy does, but he wants me to not have terrain as well. So Rillaboom versus Indeedee is going to be a very brutal matchup for me to try and play around. I'd say, as I miss a Hypnosis on Bronzong, once again, not known to be a very good accurate move. Lachagacha is used and does get the burn on the Hoopa, which is very unfortunate, as I did want to get a powerful knockoff off. As you can see, the knockoff would have defeated the Sinistcha had I not gotten burnt, but it's okay, because Sinistcha is still in a bad spot. And thankfully, Grassy Terrain is able to stifle off the slow burn chip. As Torterra does come in, Shell Smash is used, but thankfully Gallade does outspeed Torterra, barely, with Choice Scarf, as I believe the Torterra is adamant. But yes, Gallade does come in and KO. Yoskrada comes in, and we instantly anticipate that it's going to use Knockoff. Unfortunately, it ended up using Play Rough, and if I had known it was going to use Play Rough, I probably would not have swapped in Bronzong hard, but sadly that is what ended up happening. As Delphox does get the Overheat off, and I get to use Eject Pack to go straight into Indeedee to get rid of the grassy terrain, and now my Psychic Terrain stays up forever. Ogerpon is now KO'd due to rocks. Once again, those rocks proving to be extremely useful, as Indeedee does get sacked, and now Delphox is in a position. And now, huge brain play by me, I use Delphox due to it not having an item anymore, and it takes the knockoff from... Yoskarada, and it's actually able to live because it doesn't have an item, so it's only 65 base power instead of the usual 97. And yeah, because of that, I'm able to be in a position to win, and as you can see, the team got me to the 1500s. Just like that. So yeah, just another example of me being able to somehow craft a Psychic team that can get me to 1500s, but struggling with other types. Very unusual behavior, but it is what it is, right? I mean, this was me with fighting in Gen 7, 8, 7, or Gens 7 and 8, And yeah, it seems it's going to continue, but this time it's going to be with Psychic instead of Fighting, since Fighting is actually decent now. But yeah, that is pretty much it for this video. As I said before, MPL will be starting soon. I'm probably not going to be participating as a contestant due to IRL obligations and my schedule just being very inconsistent. The only thing I can consistently do for Pokemon right now is quite literally releasing these videos. So yeah, unfortunately I won't be participating as a contestant, but I will be trying to conduct interviews with players and also just doing the weekly overviews like I did with MWP. So keep an eye out for those when they do come out, but I will be doing a metagame overview. Not a ton has changed since MWP, but there are some slight optimizations that have been made. So I will try and cover those in the video, but until then, I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.